Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Untitled Marvel Project. As you can see on my compatriot Abram Buhner shirt, I'm joined by Abram Buhner, of course, and Tucker Hazel, of course. I'm your host, Tanner Dykstra, of course. We are here to talk about the highly anticipated Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. We have a lot of thoughts that we're going to share with you. Non-spoiler first, and then we'll get into the heavy spoilers for this movie. But we'll let you know when that clean cut comes. I want you to subscribe to Backlog Banter. I want you to like this video because it's going to be a fantastic review. I want you to comment your thoughts on this film in the comments down below or in the Discord. That link is in the description.
Wow.
But fellas, without further ado, who would like to give their opening thoughts on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness?
Aiden Buhner, I'm tired of hearing Tanner's thoughts, so I'm handing this one off to you.
Wow. Okay. I think this movie is cool as fuck. This is probably my favorite Marvel movie sequentially since Infinity War. I think that it's quite possible that I will cool this movie over time, as I'd like to get into. But my sort of gut check reaction, ending the film, leaving the theater, driving back here to do the review, is that
You weren't driving. You don't have a license.
no, that's true. I was riding. I think this
On
movie.
a fucking horse.
I think this movie is really quite special because of Sam Raimi's hand on it.
Yeah.
I think that the film has such inspired sound design and visual ideas, and it's just an engrossing theater experience with a lot of really great moments. I think that some of the MCU interconnected tissue here is pretty weak, as I want to talk about, but I think that nonetheless, it's enjoyable. It's quite enjoyable. I think it's a different texture for the MCU that I really appreciated, but I feel like I can start to poke holes in characters and plots and things. But nonetheless, this is, as I said before, the most fun I've had with a Marvel film in 3 years. When did Infinity War come out?
2018. Yeah, 4 years ago.
Almost exactly, yeah.
I'm gonna jump in. Sorry, I'm gonna have to subject Tucker to hearing my thoughts once again because
No!
I'm aligned with Abram Buhner here. I think this is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is easily the most unique Marvel movie we've gotten in a long time, and I hope in my heart of hearts that this sets a new bar for what MCU films can be. And I'm not talking about story interconnected stuff. We'll get to that eventually. And I think that hearing Tucker's thoughts after we walked out of the theater and hearing Abram's thoughts now, I think I might be a little more aligned with that sort of area of things. But we'll get into it. But talking purely about how Sam Raimi crafts this film is just chef's kiss. It is unlike anything we've ever seen from an MCU film before, and it legitimately warmed my heart sitting in the theaters.
Wow, your cold, dead, empty,
my cold
resurrected
dead
body
heart, my cold dead heart, which had mostly relinquished itself to the MCU having a house style. That is something that we've sort of become accustomed to. But now I think that this is going to either be an outlier, maybe unfortunately, or a new way forward for MCU films that can be just as inventive as always and still have and push themselves even farther with directorial intent. And I think Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness has that in spades in Sam Raimi.
Now, imagine if they didn't reshoot 80% of the movie. Imagine how much cooler it would have been then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this Sam Raimi-ness of this movie is, for me, the thing this movie has going for it.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think it's a good movie. I think it's a solid addition to the MCU. It's got its moments. I think I enjoyed it. But I do think that almost everything that makes it super unique is Sam Raimi's style, which for me is both a positive and a negative, as I want to get into. Because I feel like this movie feels a little bit dated in some ways, but forward-thinking in others. And it's largely a mixed bag for me, but a mixed bag that I'm glad exists because it does feel different. So I'm positive on it, but I expected to be wowed, and frankly, I really wasn't. I'm disappointed with this movie in a lot of regards. But I think that, might be the way my expectations were set, the way my expectations were set from coming off from No Way Home, which is one of my favorite Marvel movies, one of my favorite movies of all time, going into this. So I'm interested to see how my thoughts change going in. But coming out of the theater an hour ago, I think it's a good movie. But I really do think it could have been a lot better because this movie was wacky, it was creative, but it did not lean into what it could have. And I really do think that is a disappointment to me.
Those are our general thoughts. We're going to bust right into spoilers right now because there is
Kool-Aid Man. Oh yeah.
I tried to stay away from trailers and things of that nature, so I'm not sure how much of the story was revealed in those trailers, but the idea of having Scarlet Witch be this unstoppable force of evil and the antagonist for the film, it's such a cool idea. Such a great idea to have a hero in Avenger turn into the villain for a film.
Absolutely.
It's super cool. Super, super cool.
Now, I have a number of questions here because I'd like to, before we even get into like the actual content, I want to investigate what Tucker said, which is the expectations of this film. Because I thought the expectations of this movie were not at all in line with what the movie ended up being. And this is coming from somebody who had basically no expectations going in for a number of reasons, including the fact that I was spoiled on literally every cameo character.
Yeah.
My interpretation of this film going in is that it was going to be about the multiverse insofar as, boom, here are these characters. And I almost viewed Multiverse of Madness as a sort of setup film in large part of let's yoink all of these characters to Earth 616. Let's do this stuff. Let's, talk about Vision, not Vision. Let's talk about Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch, but it's mostly going to be about the concept of the multiverse. Yeah. But I think that was established by the trailers, the concepts, and the fact that No Way Home was so predicated on that appeal. It seemed like it's going to be a continuation of it, which it really isn't.
No, it's not.
My biggest issue with the film is that this is yet another example of Marvel tugging our balls with the idea of a multiverse. Because ultimately, none of the multiversal elements, maybe I'm wrong here, but they seem like they're completely immaterial. All of the crossover characters immediately killed. Awesome scene, which I want to talk about. But it seemed like they basically had no ramifications on anything. And ultimately, the multiverse feels like no more or less of a MacGuffin than it did in Far From Home for me, or Spider-Man No Way Home. It just seems like, again, where Kevin Feige is like poking at that idea, but doesn't really want to lean into it.
Go for it, Tucker.
Yeah, I think that's where I come down on it as well. I think that I saw this film as the crossover point to, hey, the multiverse, if you've been following Phase 4, holes have been poked in it from the end of WandaVision and the end of Loki and the end of No Way Home, and the shit's going crazy, and the multiverse is going to be falling in on itself, and Marvel, as we've seen with No Way Home, is recognizing its own history and self-referentiality in terms of what movie franchises mean, and Marvel storylines can cross over, and they're all canon, and what does this mean for different versions of characters in other universes, and this movie only plays with that in a perfunctory level, which I do think is, for me, quite a big disappointment, because while the way that they use the multiverse in this movie exists for the characters, for Wanda and Strange entirely, which is a good thing in its own right, I don't think it's what this movie needed to really hit home and feel exciting and big. And when you're playing with the multiverse and, outside of the we're going through all the dimensions, woo, 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 we see 3 universes, and they're cool, but they're not the craziest, and we don't really explore that much. I think it just doesn't feel like they were willing to lean into what a mad multiverse could mean. They just wanted to show a couple. Okay, that's good enough. And I'm like, damn, will we get another chance to lean into the multiverse? I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Here's what I will say, because I was thinking about this, and I think where the difference is that I guess my expectations for what this film may have been just don't affect my overall feelings toward the film as much as they do for you guys, because my question is, did Kevin Feige or anyone over at Marvel, did they say, like, this is gonna be, we're gonna see so many universes, we're gonna see so many characters, we're gonna go in balls to the wall? Or was that largely internet hype? Was that people just, what if we see, oh my god, we could get all these characters, what if we saw Tom Cruise as Iron Man, oh my god, and then that was fostered a little bit more by No Way Home, bringing in two Spider-Mans. Spoilers for No Way Home, whatever.
Everyone and their mother saw that fucking movie. It's the third highest grossing film of all time.
It was a joke. But my thing is that were those fair expectations to have for this movie. I personally don't think they were. That is, getting all those people in, getting all the rights for those things, getting actors lined up and everything, that is a Herculean effort to put on this film that I think quite unfairly. And to the point that Tucker said earlier, I think that the multiverse is actually used quite efficiently in this film, because we do get some wacky visuals when America and Doctor Strange are flying through all these different universes, but the multiverse largely exists in this film to serve the thematic crux, the characters in this film, which I can appreciate a lot more than, realistically, if they had tried to do a vast sprawling multiverse experience, it probably would not have lived up to the expectations that were set for it anyway.
I think
So I'd personally rather have that a contained multiverse thing, even though I think it does really cool things that I really like, than a half-hearted, half-done, well, we couldn't get everything that people were expecting us to have. I think that the multiverse is still used quite effectively in this film, and the disappointment just isn't there for me.
See, I think it was half-hearted, and this is kind of my issue. This is
Okay.
this is a recurrent issue I've had with Marvel since Far From Home. It was cool that we end up in this city that's basically the world of Peacock, world of Poopcock, futuristic city, which
Yes.
I thought
Yes.
was cool. But because Tanner, I agree with you.
Yeah.
One of my main criticisms of No Way Home was that the movie was, in my opinion, predicated on the nostalgia of its cameos. And I think that it would have been very easy to do that with this film. But at least No Way Home, I think, goes for it. This to me doesn't. This is, let's do the X-Men theme and let's have Patrick Stewart come out. Let's do John Krasinski as Reed Richards,
Yep.
and then immediately kill all of them. And what this kind of signaled to me was like, they understood that this is what people wanted, and they gave us like the limpest version of it.
Yes,
and at the same
exactly.
time, let's remember that I watched basically none of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And to me, this also seemed like a moment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed like a moment where we're also walking back the importance of those shows, maybe too. Because what I'm hearing from people is that maybe What If didn't matter at all. Maybe the WandaVision stuff really was not as important as we thought it was going to be. It seems, it really does seem like this is a point where we're teetering over the edge of actually doing it, actually giving us that multiverse, actually doing that, and instead we teeter on the line, because frankly, for my preference of storytelling, I wish we didn't even get close to the line. I wanted to stay back here, and I think the movie is great because largely it is very different, and I think that's part of why I loved it. But when we basically take a digression to like peer over and think like, yeah, what if Captain Carter wasn't just here to get bisected by the Shield, but what if she was here to actually like become a character? And I think the movie is half-hearted in that respect.
Well, here's what I will say, because we saw this movie an hour ago. They kept a lot of these things secret. That could still be the case. Well, the deal with the multiverse is there is infinite version of these characters that can be used. Patrick Stewart's probably not going to come back because he's like 80 or whatever. Yeah. But it's very possible that John Krasinski has a contract signed with Marvel, and he'll be, that the 616, I know, and maybe we'll get to that. The 616 Fantastic Four is trapped in the quantum verse or whatever, like that, as that fan theory goes. And it could be John Krasinski and Emily Blunt and whoever they get for the Human Torch and the Thing. Like, that's certainly feasible, and even likely, seeing as John Krasinski is in this film. I think it's likely him and Marvel have had conversations and a contract has been signed. Could be wrong, but it seems more than likely to me.
All I'd say, because I want to hear Tucker's perspective on this, but
yes.
Fool me once, you get Far From Home. Fool me twice, No Way Home. Fool me 3 times, we're doing the same thing again. That's why I just don't have confidence that just because they drop these characters in, they're going to materialize.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I do think that you're right to a degree, Tanner. The Tom Cruise as superior Iron Man, these ideas that the fans drummed up that were unlikely, to say the very least. I do think set expectations in a way that maybe is too far for what you were saying of, we can't get that far. But I really do feel like what Abram was saying is true, is it doesn't feel like they tried all the way. Because I do think that they set expectations. They didn't say this movie was going to be, we're getting all these cameos and these actors and whatever. But No Way Home has the other Spider-Mans, and it's Peter Parker, and they're played by different actors, so obviously they can lead into that. So why didn't we see someone else playing Stephen Strange? Why wasn't there a really different version of a team or whatever? And then Loki playing with the idea of alternate timelines and reality and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and people being the same version of a different character. And what if, like, they were leaning into multiverse is a big deal, all these versions of these characters, all these storylines, and I really do feel like they didn't touch on this enough. And I think the reason why, and for my all this could be unwritten when we get to Doctor Strange 3 in 5 years.
Right.
And we see what the fuck's going on in the fucking dark dimension that she's cutting
Yeah.
a hole into.
Yeah.
That could be what we're looking for.
Right.
But I do feel like there was an expectation of this movie through the holes that had been started with No Way Home having that self-referentiality, with Loki having such a breadth of realities, that this was going to be the conversion of all of that on the big screen. And it really wasn't. And I don't want to drum on this for too much, but I think maybe, and we can roll this into the characters and the story and stuff, the reason that the multiverse working only for the characters in this movie, which I think we all agree it largely does, it's rather superficial in the cameos and such. First I want to say the reason I disagree with you, Abram, on the multiverse stuff is I do think that the parallel storylines and the way that the multiverse was wrapped into Peter's storyline, of course we disagree on that, on the character stuff there, but worked so well for that character and the nostalgia, and the two of them
definitely
supported one another. But the reason I don't feel like it working solely for the characters in this movie was earned is because I don't feel that the characters in this film and their arcs are strong enough to warrant that. I think Strange is good. He's fine. Okay, cool. America, yeah, I like her. Wanda, I love the idea of her story. The execution, a little bit teeter-tottery, a little bit ham-fisted. Some dialogue I wish had been redone, a little less on the nose. Like, all these ideas for these characters I think are good. But when you're using the multiverse to support them, they should be stronger. They should really lead the movie. But I'm not coming out of this like, oh my god, I can't believe Strange went through that. I can't wait to see where he goes next. Like, nope. He's got an eyeball on his forehead now.
He certainly does.
Yep.
He really does.
Can I pose a question, actually?
Go for it, Abram.
Because I want to hear, Tanner and Tucker, your thoughts on the plot. Because if we're going to shift to the plot, I think the plot is paced poorly and is poorly motivated and established.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I want your perspective is for a couple of reasons. First of all, I watched Doctor Strange and I fell asleep during it. Second of all, I watched 2 episodes of WandaVision and Jean says, I don't really like the show. And then I said, I don't really like it either. And then we never finished it.
Yeah.
With more context, does the plot in these character arcs feel like better continuations of things that were established? Because for me, I have read House of M, I've read Vision, I've read these storylines, I'm familiar with Wanda's plight, so I understood it. Like, I felt like I could catch up to speed. But I was not sure if it's a fault of the writing and the structure of this film, or a fault of me being a lazy Marvel fan and not watching every modicum of content in this 40 installment cinematic universe. So,
I would say that the character continuation is nothing stellar, for sure. It is not S tier MCU character development, and I don't really even know what that means, but I would put it in A or B, quite honestly. Just because, like I said, the multiverse is used to further these character developments, but like it is pretty basic character developments. We get established what Wanda's deal is. She is a villain. She has been corrupted by the force that is the Scarlet Witch, which is something in the finale of WandaVision that probably would have made more sense if you had watched that. This idea of the Scarlet Witch being this other entity outside of Wanda. But if you go over to Doctor Strange, you obviously get
that movie. That movie barely fucking matters. I'm not gonna lie.
I was talking about the character of Doctor Strange.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking
okay.
about the movie.
That's okay. Going over to Doctor Strange, I mean, you get the initial setup of him. He is narcissistic. He is ambitious, and he often extends himself beyond his means, and he has to find a way to dig himself out of this. But over the course of becoming the Sorcerer Supreme, he's become more self-assured, and he has this weight of responsibility of being the Earth's protector in the mystic realm. And then in this, I think it sort of it explores those ideas of, for Stephen Strange being like, am I happy? Like, am I fulfilled in my role as, well, he's not the Sorcerer Supreme, but he basically is. Like, in this, like, this, Wong basically, like, lets him take care of things a lot of the time. He's basically the Sorcerer Supreme. But is he happy? Is he feeling fulfilled with all this power that he has? And that gets into the things of him seeing alternate versions of himself that sought out greater power, that sought out greater ambition. And I think that's what this movie is really about, is being, self-assured in the life that you are living and not, like, overextending yourself and wanting to garner further connections and that greed of personal connection that isn't feasible to have. I think that's what this movie is really about. And I think that theme and the characters is there. It's not, oh my god, amazing, mind-blowing stuff, but it's there. And I do enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, Tanner said it.
Yeah.
The setup is that Wanda wants her kids back, and boy, how did they let you know that in this movie?
Yeah,
because basically every scene she's in is the exact same. I really want my kids. They're in another dimension. I'm gonna get to the other dimension. Boop, put that on repeat for like the 15 scenes that she's in this movie.
Or she's being a super murder badass, which is also dope to see.
Sure, but like that wasn't like super set up by WandaVision. Like I think the continuation of the things that they set up at the end of WandaVision, I thought were going to be more compelling. Frankly, I thought that the bare minimum for the Wanda storyline out of this was that we were gonna really see what happens to her kids, and are they going to be a part of the larger Marvel universe in terms of becoming characters, and what happened to White Vision at the end of WandaVision. Like these things were set up that I'm like, of course they're going to be paid off in Multiverse of Madness. It's the follow-up to WandaVision. Why would it not? But like, I feel like Wanda is used very interestingly here in terms of twisting a hero and making her the villain. But her motivation is that she wants her kids real bad. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I really just feel like they didn't make me feel the pain of a lost mother. They just really kept saying it over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's also, I don't really like the kids for Tommy and Billy.
I like one of them.
Yeah, they're fine. And I don't want to be too harsh on child actors. Oh, okay. But I think a lot of your emotional connection rides on their performance to these kids that you want to see. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just gotta say, you remember the sequence where they're like, "No, mom," or no, they're like, "Mom, come see our thing. Come see our thing. This is important. This is important." It reminded me of the fucking Stevie. What's the Family Guy character? Stewie. Stewie. Me was like, Mommy, Mom. Because it sounded like they were using the same voice clips over and over again. I'm like, this is really obnoxious.
Yeah.
But the kids are. But like, I really feel like there should have been a huge amount of emotional weight because frankly, the end of WandaVision is very emotional for Wanda, and I feel like that energy wasn't carried through here. The concept is there, but the execution, because a lot of her dialogue is very on the nose in terms of her motivation, and I'm going to do this, and like sometimes it's like sentence, repeat sentence, and then
I can see where you're coming from. I think I agree. Yeah,
I think Kevin Feige ought to put aside whatever preferences he has and kiss Sam Raimi directly on the mouth for directing this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really think that if this movie was directed by, I hate to shit on him again, but John Watts, if this movie was directed by somebody who blends into the Marvel machine, then it would be really poor.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because everything you're saying, Tanner, I got. Now, again, I am not your just fucking regular degenerate who walks off the street to see this movie. I've read House of M. I understand these characters a little bit, even if I don't have the MCU iterations of them. Like, and I just like can intuit the movie's plot. My point being is that a lot of the setup, as you guys saying, felt completely immaterial to me because everything you're saying, like, oh yeah, I got that. I didn't feel like I'm missing anything, and I think it comes down to the fact that for me, this movie, you really have to buy into it. You have to buy into the fact that Scarlet Witch really wants her kids back. Yeah. You have to buy into who America Chavez is. Like. You have to buy into these things. And I think that you have to always suspend your disbelief in comic book films to some extent, but I think this one really requires that because I really do think it is carried by the patina of Sam Raimi in large part.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the visual, as I was saying at the beginning, I think that most of this movie for me fell a little bit flat. And the Sam Raimi-ness, as I think we're transitioning to now, is the clear outlier for that. It is very strong visually and very creative and very different. But let's talk about the strength first, and I'll talk a little bit about my Sam Raimi weakness at the end of that section. But man, this movie's really fucking wacky in its visuals.
Rocks. I love it. That's why when I walked out of the theater, I was confident in giving this a 5-star. Is because of Sam Raimi. I mean, he is the guy that kicked off the superhero genre. I mean, we had X-Men 2000, but with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy,
with my boy,
namely Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2.
Namely Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, okay. But getting this guy in to hop in. What are we now? Like 25 movies deep in the MCU? More than that, I think. Actually,
feels like it should be more than that.
Yeah, it is. And the fact that he can come in and just inject this movie with so much style and imagination. Yes.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. But like, just the camera movements and the lighting and how he makes these characters look in the frame and things like that. Sound design, exactly. The music from Danny Elfman, if we want to break out of the Raimi-ness a little bit, but it's Raimi and Elfman. They're buddies. They're hooking up in this movie. Let me tell you that much. But yeah, it is crazy, and that is why I'm going to go back and see this movie again, is to experience Sam Raimi's hand behind the camera in this.
Tanner, I think you're right, and it actually reminds me a lot of why I love Batman vs Superman, because as we exposed in our long Batman vs Superman review, I really could not put up any reasonable defense for the plot of that film, right? Because it's incoherent, and this is nowhere near as incoherent as Batman vs Superman. But the reason I love both films is actually quite similar. It's about the spectacle of them, and this is a different kind of spectacle. But Sam Raimi brings such a unique style, visual style, technical style to the film, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because ultimately, comic books are usually not very well written. To be honest with you, there are so many comic books released, and there is a scant few that actually rise above their genre, to be honest.
Yeah, no, of course.
And the reason that I enjoy a lot of comics, even ones that are poorly written, is because of the spectacle. It is the artwork, it is the characters, it is what you're experiencing, not necessarily perhaps the thoughtfulness of it. And I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with me sitting down in a theater and having an incredible experience of spectacle. And I think Marvel's spectacle for me was getting tired because it was the same set piece tropes and things over and over again. This wasn't that. So while I don't think it was that deep, while I don't think it was necessarily even that well constructed on a more plot level, character level, that spectacle was so fresh to me. Like even something as simple as saying, let's have the fight against what's his name? Strange Superior Strange.
It's not Strange Supreme. I told you it was going to be, because boy, does the end of What If really make you want to think it is. What If does not connect to this at all.
Nope.
But the point is,
just evil Doctor Strange,
just an idea as inspired as they're gonna fight by throwing music notes back and forth at each other. Like, that's incredible. That is the kind of stuff that I wish I was surprised by in every Marvel film. It would make it way easier for me to overlook the issues that, frankly, I do overlook in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we're going into eyeballs, and we're doing like fisheye lens stuff, and we are even in something as simple as that Doctor Strange, Baron Mordo like hand-to-hand combat sequence when they both have their magic sort of nullified. We're sweeping the camera along the floor, and we're shoving it right up into these characters as they're beating each other up. We're shoving it into them. I get really innuendo-y when I'm talking about things passionately. I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, I love like when Wanda is beating the shit out of all those of the Ultron bots, and she comes out, and we're in a PG-13 Marvel movie, so she can't be covered in blood, but it's like slick black oil that is essentially blood. Fantastic look. The stuff when she murders the Illuminati is brutal, and probably the most brutal stuff we've ever gotten in the MCU.
100%.
I mean, Moon Knight tries to sell itself as like, we're gonna see Moon Knight, bleh, she's gonna beat the shit out of people, bleh. But like, Black Bolt, Wanda erases Black Bolt's mouth, and then he screams and it caves his own head in. She cuts Captain Marvel in half, Captain Carter in half. She shreds Mr. Fantastic. I mean, come on.
Can we stop here for a second, Tanner? Because this sequence to me, I think, is emblematic of why this movie is really quite special to me. Because
Sure.
it takes a really talented director to evoke like the feeling of horror with being able to show nothing. Like he has restraint because it's a PG-13 film, and I think the film is better for that. I think that a straight up let's see Captain Carter get like cut in half. I think that's frankly less interesting than what it does here because it is so masterful what you can see, what you can't see. That reaction shot of, oh my God, Scarlet Witch just caught the shield, flies back. You see it on her face and you realize what just happened. And then the bloody shield hits the wall. And then it makes things like, God, that neck snap on
Professor X.
Professor X is crazy because it's out of nowhere. Boom, snap neck. It's this tension between I can show you this, I can't show you this. And it feels like we're always just stepping over the line at these key moments. And it takes such a confident hand to do that. And it kept me continually engaged in the movie.
Yeah, I do think that the movie is at its strongest when it's leaning into Sam Raimi's his experience, which is with horror movies and with
which I haven't seen
and campiness and stuff. There's a lot of Evil Dead in this movie.
Oh yeah,
I think it's better for it because I think that moments like Wanda spidering out of the fucking gong in Camartage, and all the things that are dream sequences and extra violent and things like that, I do think are the best parts of this movie. They're certainly the most memorable parts of this movie. But I think this is, pretty much opposite of what you've been saying, but a lot of my enjoyment of the MCU comes pretty much solely from its characters. I turn my mind off when there's an action sequence, and I enjoy it for the screen grab moments where characters are like going at it. But for me, if I'm not as invested in the characters and their motivations and their arcs, good fight sequences don't really matter too much to me. Well, I'm very happy they're in this movie, and I'm so glad Sam Raimi got a chance to do this stuff. It doesn't feel as rewarding to me to see Scarlet Witch, who I think has done fine in this movie, go against the Illuminati, who I think are underutilized in this movie, because I don't care that much about these characters in this movie. So that crazy sequence doesn't make me go, oh shit, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. It's like, oh yeah, Sam Raimi's doing his thing. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's different from other Marvel movies. So yeah, that's just my perspective.
No, I think that's a fair point, but I think that it extends beyond just the action sequences, which I agree with you. Sure. Typically, I do turn my brain off from Marvel action sequences because they're usually badly choreographed and edited. But like it goes to things for me like the camera flipping, so we have Scarlet Witch oriented like this way in the frame as we're match cutting between her and the dream walked version of her. Like that's really inspired, or just a visual idea of, okay, first of all, we get to see Professor X stand, which is fine, whatever. There's somebody in my theater who's really excited about that, but
that's weird.
It's like the dream version of it. It doesn't even really matter.
They should go watch Dark Phoenix.
But
and the first two X-Men films,
there's just like this just white space with the rubble, and then this brilliant red cloud comes in. Like I think
very
it goes.
Cool. Very Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I think it does go beyond the action, but Tugger, I still get what you're saying about it maybe feeling hollow if you don't connect to the character.
No. For me, it's just those action sequences, and why they're not going to be in my favorite action sequences of all time. And I'd be like, oh yeah, remember the Illuminati fight? But I'm not going to be like, oh my, the Illuminati fight, holy fuck! And of course, that other people might totally feel that way. But for me, I feel that way. My preferences align much more with characters and the storytelling of what superheroes can do, and making me attached to these action sequences because I care about Tony Stark and I care about Peter Parker. I don't really care about Doctor Strange, and I think that's why this movie doesn't really hit for me. Is Stephen Strange in this movie is neither the arrogant asshole he was in the first one, or like a completely reformed version. He's like 75% of the way to like a new version of the character, but he's just like he's a good guy. Come on, guys, isn't he? You should trust me. I'm a good guy. Like a lot of my disconnect with this movie, I was like, what's Stephen Strange doing here? He's a superhero that likes to take care of people. Isn't that nice? It just kind of feels half-hearted.
I don't know. Yeah, I can see where you can say that. Where you say that, I see where you're coming from. Because
there's no character moments for Stephen Strange in this movie.
No,
there's no
they
him
tried
falling
with the whole,
or
yeah, they try with, well, even then, like, my thing is, how many of those type of things do we get out of an MCU film? You know, how many?
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, whatever. But I think they do try that with, like, the thing where he's talking to evil Doctor Strange about the sister, then that which comes out of
Yeah, which
nowhere.
doesn't really hit for me.
Exposition dump. Sorry,
Exposition
that's what
dump
it
sort of
is.
thing.
Exposition dump that doesn't really make sense in the context of the multiverse.
Or matter. He could say,
Yeah.
you fucking keep your underwear in the top drawer, and it accomplishes the same thing. You know what I mean?
But then how would he know? Because this is supposed to
Also,
be an
like,
entirely alternate universe. So like, how does he know that this version of Strange has a sister
Because
named
there's
this
a
or died in this
fixed
way?
point in time, Tucker.
Yeah, but they don't really drill into that. I don't know.
Here's what I will say.
No, hang on, but back up. I wanted to talk about I actually keep going. I lost my train of thought. I'm very sorry that I stopped you there.
This is still about Doctor Strange, so it's fine.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
What? In our Doctor Strange.
I was ready to transition into our Avatar 2 trailer discussion.
Oh man, we'll get there eventually.
But the one bit of characterization I liked a lot actually was the stuff dealing with the ramifications of Doctor Strange being like, okay, fine, I'm going to give away the time stone, right?
Sure.
Mhm.
Now, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of it. And at first I thought to myself, man, we really just are going to keep talking about the blip in every movie, huh? And then I remembered, like, man, every conversation I have with every person ever always comes right back to the pandemic. So maybe it's kind of realistic.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, I like the idea of this being like a really focal thing in the Marvel universe. And even though
Yeah.
it's in the past now, it's this thing that we must interrogate through the lens of all these different characters. It also makes me recognize how, like, Doctor Strange hasn't actually had any characterization really in 3 years now or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do like this idea of him having to reconcile the fact, like, yeah, I made the decision that snapped
Mhm.
half of all people away. And it is, I think, again, to my concept of having to buy into it. Like, it is a scant dialogue exchange with a character I have never seen before or
Yeah,
ever
who the hell
cared
is
about.
that guy?
He was the rival Michael Stuhlbarg's
Oh, is that
character?
Benjamin Bratt?
Benjamin Button?
Wait, who the fuck are you talking about? Michael Stuhlbarg's character?
Yeah, who's that?
He's
Mr. West. Wally
Yeah,
West?
Dr. West. He's like the rival doctor from
Wake up, Dr. West.
the original-
Dr. West. It's Kanye West joke.
Keep going, Tucker. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
No, I was gonna say he's like a C tier character from the first movie,
Oh,
and
okay.
his inclusion in this I think was really ham-fisted for whatever fucking reason.
Yeah.
No, you're right. But it is a vehicle. I think if you want to connect a little bit deeper, I think it gives you a sort of thing to think about.
Yeah,
which
no,
is not
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a low bar, but it's still something I think that is interesting as someone who is engaged by these characters in the universe.
I do think that what you're saying here is a perfect indication of why I do think this movie falls flat in the writing department and in the character motivation department, because that idea should have been the whole impetus of this movie. He should be not just waking up from a dream and then snapping his tie on and having a good day. He should be like traumatized by the ramifications. Like, we should see him sitting there thinking about it, talking to people about the fact, and like some people that are mad at him for doing that, and like he should be dealing with that throughout the end of until the end of the movie, where he realizes no sacrifices need to be made, and boom, that's the character flip, and now we really feel satisfied. But he pretty much came to terms with that
Yeah.
off screen, and then people talk about it, but not all the way, and then we really got to focus on America.
I
Rest of
think
this movie.
that's really interesting because, as I said, I think this movie is a lot about like self-assuredness in your life path, and you guys bring up a great point. Doctor Strange is already assured that he made the right decision there. Like, there's not a lot of like inner conflict for him around that, or I guess the inner conflict for him comes from should I have Rachel McAdams, who she played, Christine
Palmer. Yeah.
Christine Palmer. That is the conflict for Doctor Strange in this film. Is that like, am I happy? Like I did all this and I'm assured in my decision there, but if I made a different decision, could I have been with the love of my life, Christine Palmer?
Yeah.
And yes, he saves the world again, and he's like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. You know, this is who I am. Sacrifices have to be made in that sense. But yeah, I think the thing about and this is being wishful thinking about like, oh, here's what the movie should have been about, which it is fair. I think it is fair. I think to criticize the film on seeing as it does bring up the blip and Doctor Strange's decision, but I think it was a way to get Christine Palmer involved as well. So, you know,
Yeah. I think the reason that I do think that it's a very valid criticism is that I don't think that storyline is strong enough. I think Christine Palmer is
the romance
character.
was not the centerfold point for Doctor Strange.
I wish
Yeah.
they'd used
In
the
any
multiverse.
film.
I wish they'd used the multiverse to bring back Arnold Palmer.
Boy,
yeah.
let's talk about America Chavez actually a second, because she's an important part of this film. That is, that we haven't talked about extensively yet. I like her. If we're talking about things that might have larger ramifications on the universe, a character who can traverse the multiverse is probably going to play a big part in future MCU projects and films. And the fact that the actress is only 15, and they can get her on contract for until she's fucking 45 years old or whatever.
Are they gonna do a show? Do we know that or anything?
She's
think
not
there's
confirmed for any future projects,
Yeah, but
which is not. Of course, she's going to be, but like,
yeah, they're obviously building a Young Avengers, and America Chavez is a character on that Young Avengers team, so that's probably where we're gonna be at.
yeah. I like her, but I really feel like I should love her, and I think that's my problem. Is she's introduced in this movie because this is the movie that introduces America Chavez, and not because like they had a insanely compelling America Chavez story to write. Like seeing her origin story in like sort of a half-hearted flashback was okay. And like having her introduced right away and then bam, dropped into New York City and now she's friends with Doctor Strange. Like it all feels like we need this character here, and she's gonna be in it, and she's gonna have a bond with Stephen Strange, and I think I just didn't feel the weight of any of that enough. I really feel like we should have dived more into her history and her trauma of being displaced from her universe and the lack of her parents and honestly just learned more about her. But she felt like the basic teen superhero who doesn't know how to use her powers, and boy, she just needs to learn to trust herself. And like that's not for a character that is as interesting as America Chavez, with being from a universe and not having a family and these things that make her such a strong character in the comics, which is why I'm excited to see her. Is I like her in the comics and she's interesting conceptually. I think there needs to be a more compelling America Chavez story here that is not really played into in this film.
Batman is both from a universe and has no parents, Tucker.
And you know what? He's a more compelling.
Here's what I'll say about America Chavez.
And we could get that. We'll likely get that story later on. Is what I was just considering.
I don't know who America Chavez is, to be honest with you, and I don't coming out of the movie either. Yeah. There are three MacGuffins in this movie. There's the good book, the bad book, and America Chavez.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you turn a character into a MacGuffin or into a plot point, whatever, you end up on thin ice of, well, are you actually going to develop her at all?
Just like Doctor Strange's sister.
The nice joke. I like that.
Thank you.
Frankly, Tanner, your jokes haven't been hitting for me in this episode. Okay. I'm sorry, but I like that one a lot. That was great.
I'll let you go fuck yourself. Actually,
I think that she to me feels similar to Spider-Man in Civil War. Of this character's going to serve a plot function, so we're going to bring them in. But the difference is everybody who's watching Civil War knows who Spider-Man is. Mm-hmm. Nobody who's watching Multiverse Madness knows who America Chavez is, but it's treated as though you should. And I picked it up, but I wanted to not have to just like intuit who this character is. Now it did excite me to read some of her comics. Mm-hmm. It did do that, but I think that the MCU I think should know at this point that it is not serving comic fans primarily.
There's an interesting line that I don't think they properly balance in this movie of what you're saying is expectations of. You should come in with this knowledge so we don't really need to dive into it, and that's okay, and that expedites storytelling in other ways, but with a character that is as niche as America Chavez, but is as important to the lore of this world as she is, and breaking fucking awesome stars in the universe. Yeah. Like, I really do think we should have leaned into her story more, and not learning more about her personality and her backstory and stuff, I do think made her feel more like a MacGuffin, more like yes, this is a teen character. Yep, like
that's a good point. I think you bring up an interesting point, Abram, about interesting, but perhaps you didn't think about the full context of what you said, which, as usual, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. But I think comparing her to a character like Spider-Man, who was brought in Civil War, is interesting because America Chavez was probably introduced in the comics in what 2013-ish, likely,
Yeah.
so no, very recently in the 2010s. And I think what the MCU is maybe trying to do here, getting a young actress and introducing her in a big tentpole film that's going to bring a lot of people out, is getting general audiences introduced to her. And maybe this isn't a great introduction to get people to care about her story, and I largely agree that she is largely a MacGuffin in this film. But I think the difference there is that people knew who Spider-Man was before Civil War. We had 5 Spider-Man films and any number of other Spider-Man media. But I think what the MCU is capable of, as we saw with what they did with like B tier, C tier Marvel characters like Iron Man starting out, is they can make these characters into big deals.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a bit of a rocky start for America Chavez, but they could very well grow her into a huge MCU presence in the future, and
Absolutely.
they likely will with how much they're emphasizing the multiverse and things like that, and given her abilities. I think it's definitely likely.
Tanner, I think it's a good point, but I don't think you thought about the larger context.
Oh my god, I
Because
can't believe it! I can't believe I didn't do that.
But I think the reason that something as successful, I think the obvious one is Guardians of the Galaxy. The reason that's successful is because we had so much time to drink in these characters and learn their personalities and their worlds, and you just don't do that here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch out for the America Chavez Disney Plus series coming 2024, baby.
I'm starting to run on fumes here. Is there anything else
I was gonna say. One thing I wanted to say that's really is just a cool thing. Zombie Doctor Strange is super cool. I love the like the death spirits or whatever. They have like weird they have weird voices, which
it's very
love.
Evil Dead.
Yeah,
it's very Evil Dead in the
exactly.
way that Sam Raimi likes to direct funny ghouls who make fun of their main characters.
Yeah.
And those definitely do that. I do think that whole undead strange thing and
moment of the undead strange and his cape gets made out of these evil spirits is dope.
Cool.
I love that.
It's very cool.
I'm running out of fumes as well. I think just touching on a few extra things. It's interesting. I think this movie is very creative visually, and the camera work and things of that nature. But I do feel like it almost doesn't lean as much into the wackiness of Doctor Strange's abilities as I want it to. Because if you think, think about that Infinity War fight on the fucking moon of Jupiter or whatever, where a bunch of arms come out and he's breaking holes in the mirror dimension and stuff. In this movie, most of the fights that he's in, he's throwing like balls of energy and using like a whip. And it's like, you can do more than that. You can do more than just fly and use a whip. Like, it doesn't feel like they're leaning into the abilities of Doctor Strange as much as they could.
Tucker, I disagree. I think think about he uses like dragon arms at multiple points in this film. He conjures up like a big giant face that just eats something, like grabs something and disappears. That's like half a second of screen time. But like they just throw it in there, and then they have like the buzzsaw thing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
that's my point though.
And the music fight,
that's a half a second of screen time. Most of the fights though, he's just using the rest of that Shumagorath, I think so, fight. He's just using a whip to hold it down. And like, he could be breaking a hole in the mirror dimension and fucking sending this to another realm and like using all sorts of crazy visual crazy powers. But he's using a whip and he's throwing daggers at it.
But the film
That's
doesn't
what
have
he does.
the film doesn't have the power of the SSD, Tucker. It can't seamlessly load these other dimensions.
Another thing I will say is that, with the exception of that Infinity War fight, which is what that everyone points to, that's largely what Doctor Strange has done in like most of his films.
Sure,
is the whips and the shields and the yada yada yadas. Like, and you could say, I mean, if you wanted to, you could give a lore explanation that like when you're in a heated battle like that, you're gonna go back to what you know. I feel like that's maybe.
Yeah, that's a lot of hokum, Tanner.
Sorry.
A heated battle like fighting Thanos on the moon Titan?
I agree with Tanner. I agree with you, but I think Tucker's point is fair because, sure, maybe Doctor Strange only used the million arms one time, but he used a million arms one time, so he can do it again. Yeah. Right? And that's kind of my perspective on it. Like, Marvel is at no shortage of resources here. If they wanted to do crazier stuff with him, they could. But and from my perspective, I don't think they needed to because I do think that the film is already wild enough visually. We do get some really cool things, like when Scarlet Witch is in that like fucking like crystal mirror ball and that
Yeah,
shit's
that
like
was dope.
shooting at her, or as I was saying, the
What about
music
the part where Wong puts her in a Pokeball? Wasn't that fun?
Oh
that
yeah.
was fun.
I
But
just want to
but
say Pokeball.
but I do think that there's plenty there from my
No, there,
perspective.
there is plenty, but I think the reason that it was apparent to me isn't because the movie isn't fun visually, but it's because in the moments where he wasn't using his powers, I'm like, well, why isn't he? Like,
Sure.
when he's hanging off the guy by a whip, he can do, he can get out of that situation. He was the Sorcerer Supreme. He has access to essentially infinite magic abilities. Why is he just throwing daggers at it in that moment? Like there are just numerous moments where he's getting pummeled or he's something's like, no, you can do more than that, and we see him do more than that. Why isn't it leaning into that all the time? I
At a
don't know.
I think that's at a certain point. I think that's something that you can levy at every single character in the MCU. Is like, why aren't they doing this one thing that I saw them do one time? So I don't necessarily think about that as much of a negative in my mind.
I think it's to me it feels. I agree with you that they could do more stuff because they did in the Infinity Saga, but at a
Mhm.
certain point, it also is the but why don't the Avengers just show up to solve this problem
Yeah,
line of thinking for me
Mhm.
also.
sure.
And again, in a movie that wasn't directed by Sam Raimi, maybe the uninspired elements you're talking about would feel apparent to me, but it really
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to say, then I want to get the fuck out of here. I want to go to bed.
Mhm.
Is and I mentioned it briefly, but I really think the sound design in this film is excellent.
Oh yeah.
Having the motif of the piano and like the plucked strings and everything, it's very archetypally horror, but I think it works so well. And there's just like the sound moving around my theater and everything. It's I think it might also just be more a little bit more tuned to it because I'm actually working with sound in like my production classes right now. But I do think
Mhm.
that Sam Raimi paid an extra attention to this film sonically, having a very different sound to it than a lot of other Marvel movies do. So I just wanted to shout that out.
Love the guitar riffs. Love the WandaVision theme being in there. Love the X-Men theme being in there. Those are all dope things that are in this movie that have to do with sound.
Yeah, the sound is good, but I personally think that the score isn't phenomenal because I do feel like Doctor Strange has a great theme song, and you're making a like multiversal version where you can play different versions of that theme song with different instruments that fit the universe that he's in, and they use it. They use it the one time when he, very cool moment where when he is at the wedding, he gets the cape on, he jumps off, the fucking cool, and they
Yep.
play the Doctor Strange theme. But I believe that's the only time they use that motif in the film, which I think is a little bit disappointing because having access to such a good theme written by Michael Giacchino, one of the great composers,
Mhm.
Danny Elfman, good composer, but I think this is kind of a lot like what he did with, I believe he did the Age of Ultron score. Is you take the iconic theme and you
Did
just,
Danny Elfman do Age of Ultron?
I believe so,
There's no way.
and just don't do it as good.
Um, there's something I was gonna say. Oh, I was just gonna say, Tucker. I think you can probably fit the number of people who know the Doctor Strange theme into a small football arena.
Yeah, I don't know. I could not hum it with a gun to my head. I could not hum it.
We're running out of fucking
Yeah.
steam here.
Danny
Anything else to
Elfman
say?
and Brian Tyler. Oh, yeah, you were right about the Age of Ultron thing. Pause. Time out. Do we want to give this a score in the ranking?
Yes,
Okay,
because
sounds
this is
good.
an Untitled Marvel Project review.
Okay, everyone pull
Who
it
gives a shit? This show's dumb. It's no my Star Wars show.
up. We'll do a Star Wars ranking eventually for that show.
I don't want to
Don't
be
you
on
worry.
it.
Don't you worry. It's your show. Of course you're gonna be on it.
No, that's not gonna be part of it. I can't have that be part of my Star Wars show.
Okay, hang on. Doctor.
It could be my untitled Star Wars project, a crossover.
Mom. There we go.
Okay, let me put in a number. Let me throw in a completely arbitrary number so I can be done here.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, and as always, this is a official Untitled Marvel Project ranking episode, so we're going to give this a score. Does everyone have a number typed into their numbery doodly calculatories?
I
Oh,
believe
yeah.
so.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. Wowie zowie, look at that number. Going from the top down here, I gave this film an 8.9, Abram gave this an 8.1, and Tucker gave it a 6.8. That averages out to a 7.93, which is going to put this above Iron Man 2, but below Hawkeye. in our overall ranking, which isn't completely done yet, but it's interesting that we're sort of doing it piecemeal with the old films and the new films. So.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually, and they'll all
Yeah.
be on it, and that's all that ultimately matters.
Yeah, exactly. So right there, it'll be at spot number 9.
Out of 15.
Out of 15.
14.
So, 14.
Yes, 14 projects.
Will be interesting to see how it fares when we get the rest of the films in there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me, fellas, on this immediate reaction to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. If you love our thoughts, if you disagree with our thoughts, let us know in the comments, let us know in Discord. But otherwise, we'll be back with the Uncharted Marvel project coming up very quickly with Guardians of the Galaxy. We'll be getting back into the swing of things, baby. Until then, we'll see you next time.
A bunk? Let's go on an adventure.
It's over!